Are you ready? Let's bake. Today we're going to be making no-knead bread. Now there are many no-knead bread recipes that you can find on the internet. And most of these recipes have you take the dough, put it in the refrigerator, and let it slowly rise overnight. This is not the bread we're going to be making today. Today we're going to make a quick no-knead bread. You're going to be able to start it and finish it in less than 2 hours. So this particular recipe is great for off-grid. Let's say your power goes out for several days. There are different options of baking this bread without your regular oven. And I'm going to show you those later in the video. I also want to give a shout out to Jerry, who suggested this video. So let's get started. First of all, how do you know what kind of yeast to use? There are 3 main kinds of yeast. There's active dry yeast, instant yeast, and fresh yeast. Active dry yeast is the one that's most recipes call for. You also have instant yeast, which looks and acts a lot like active dry yeast. There are some advantages of instant yeast. It rises and works a little bit faster, and that means you can make pizza dough a little bit quicker than you might otherwise. But it also has some negative things as well. Because it rises so fast, you're going to lose a little bit of that yeasty flavor. The reason is when the bread is rising, it rises faster and it doesn't have as much time to gain that flavor. But really, that's the only sacrifice I can think of. Keep in mind, if you use instant yeast instead of dry active, you only need 1 teaspoon instant versus 1 1/4 dry active in recipes. The last thing we're touching on is fresh yeast. Fresh yeast has a little bit of a downside. It doesn't have as long as a shelf life. If stored in a tightly sealed container, can last for several weeks. For every single teaspoon of active dry, you need about 1/2 ounce of fresh yeast. These other 2 yeasts can live in your refrigerator or freezer for a very long time, which is what this channel is about, long-term food storage. Bonus yeast. There is another type of yeast called wild yeast. Wild yeast is all around us. It's everywhere in the air. There is a water yeast video I'll be uploading in the next few weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Now on to our recipe. We will be making 2 types of no-knead bread, one with water and the other with milk and an egg. First order of business is to go over the baking equipment you're going to need. Dough scraper. My favorite scraper is pretty old. I purchased it years ago in Napa at the CIA. The scraper is to help get the dough off the counter as well as a few other things. The Dutch oven is the best option, but a Pyrex with a lid would work. You could use a skillet, which you'll see in the milk dough recipe, but it has no lid to trap the steam. I'll go over the need for steam in a moment. There are several items you could use to trap the steam, foil being one of them. If you use no lid, you could always add an oven-safe bowl such as a small Pyrex filled with water and set next to the bread or on the rack below, and this will help add steam. I use this when I make ciabatta, which I'll be soon uploading a video on it as well. It's essential to have steam during the beginning of baking a loaf of bread. By using a Dutch oven with this wet dough, that all-important steam is trapped inside surrounding the loaf. This keeps the crust soft and cooler longer, allowing the yeast to go to work and the loaf to grow. We're going to combine water, yeast, flour, and salt in a large bowl. The dough will feel a little bit shaggy while you're mixing it. This is not a smooth dough. Once mixed, you're going to cover the bowl with plastic wrap. I use an extra large shower cap just for this purpose. Let dough rise in a warm place for about an hour. Once dough has almost doubled in size, remove from the bowl onto a lightly floured surface. Sprinkle the top of the dough enough that it's not sticky. Place the ball of dough into a bowl lined with parchment paper. Let it rest for 10 to 15 minutes. Place the Dutch oven or skillet into the oven to heat thoroughly. Take the Dutch oven from the oven and place on a heat-proof surface. Take the dough and parchment paper and place carefully into the hot vessel. Add lid and place in oven. Be very, very careful, it's easy to get burned. After 30 minutes, remove the Dutch oven from the oven, lift the parchment paper and bread from the vessel, remove the parchment paper and return the bread back to the Dutch oven, then return to the oven without the lid. Okay, Ron, moment of truth. Let's have a taste.
Wow, that's tasty.
Is it?
That's really good.
This video is interrupted for 10 seconds of cuteness. We have a few extra ingredients on this particular recipe. We've got sugar, milk, and eggs this time instead of water. I'm going to start off with milk, the sugar, the yeast. Sugar feeds yeast. So I want to get that mixed in. And I chose ghee instead of the butter. And then you have your egg, and you know I usually use powdered egg. Now we're going to add in our flour. And at any point in time you could add in your salt, but I tend to add the salt in at the end. Not a real particular great reason, just I like to combine as much things into that yeast before I add that salt. The yeast does not love the salt. Now remember, this is going to be a little bit of a shaggy type of dough. It is not a smooth dough. Very similar from this point as our last recipe with the water. You're going to put the shower cap on, let it rest for about an hour. Then once it rests, then you dump it out onto a lightly floured surface. You're supposed to not be kneading it, you're just trying to get it into a ball. Now I put it in the parchment without realizing I was using the skillet this time. So right after this, I took it out and I put it in the skillet. It's a very hot skillet. Now I'm scored the top of it like I did the other. I give it a new design. Put it in the oven for 30 minutes at 400, not 450 this time. And it came out beautiful. I don't know if you could hear that, but it thump, thump, thumps. That was hot. But boy, doesn't that sound beautiful. And just absolutely moist, crunchy on the outside, everything that you want a bread to be. You can also turn this into a sourdough bread as well. I'll leave a recipe in the description box below. I was speaking with a friend and subscriber about how to cook if we had no power. One way to bake bread off-grid would be a Coleman oven using propane, or you could use a solar oven on a sunny day. Another way is with a gas or charcoal grill. I've left a link to The Need to Bake in the description box. He's one of my go-to YouTube channels to get ideas on my bread making. Well, that was a lot of information. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned from it, and I hope you'll see us next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.